Hello, sir.
Hi there. Hello. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Good morning.
Morning, morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Can we?
Yes, okay, so we are live on YouTube now.
Okay.
It's live on our YouTube channel, our official broadcast channel of Damdama College Library. In this channel, we have around 363 subscribers right now, and many are joining this event.
Okay.
We are also recording this event on our Zoom cloud-based server. Okay, convener sir, shall I just brief some technical issues?
Okay, please.
Point. So a warm welcome to all panelists, experts, paper presenters, Zoom attendees, YouTube live viewers to the 2 days national webinar on science fiction in an age of crisis, organized by Damdama College, Assam. I am Tridip Bharali, the technical coordinator of this 2 days national webinar. So before moving to the main proceedings of today's event, there are a few technical announcements. Number 1, we are live on YouTube. Number 2, we are also recording this event on our cloud-based server. And to all the Zoom attendees, you all can use the chat box during the entire program for communication with each other. Also, you can use the chat box to raise questions to our honorable panelists. You can also use the question answer feature that is available right in front of your screen. You can also put your questions or queries on the YouTube video comment box, live comment box. So these are few points which we shall follow. And I would now like to request our respected convener, sir, to carry forward the proceedings of today's event. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you. Philip, can you do something about the echo that is coming around?
Sir, মই ইকো পাই আছো মই মানে কি একচুয়ালি মই ধৰিব পৰা নাই কাৰণটো মই চাই আছো আপুনি কেৰি অন কৰক স্যাৰ ইকোটো মোৰ হৈছে অকল ন
অলপমান ইকো হৈছে there's an echo
ইকোটো মই আপোনাৰ ফোনৰ পৰা পাই আছো এটো ওভাৰঅল ইকো এটা হৈ আছে প্ৰবলেমটো ওকে ওকে স্যাৰ আপুনি আৰম্ভ কৰক মই সেটেল কৰিব চাই আছো স্যাৰ ইস্যুটো
ওকে ৰবা মই তেতিয়াহ'লে অলপমান
Please, respected panelists, please ensure that no laptop or your any digital items is running on nearby you. Okay. It's okay now, I think, sir. It's okay from my side.
Acha. Any echo to ase kya Sidi? Oh, still there. Echo is still there.
Yes, sir. Oh, Principal sir. Principal sir, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Good morning.
Sir sound is fine, sir. I think the problem is with me and convener, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Girdhar Rao, sir, are you hearing me? Convener, sir, we shall start, I think.
Okay. So, respected Principal, Damdama College, Dr. Suranjan Sharma, sir, respected colleagues joining us from various parts of the country to the Zoom platform, the Facebook Live, and YouTube channel. Dear friends and well-wishers, a very good morning and warm welcome to all of you. This is the opening statement of our webinar on science fiction in an age of crisis. To discuss the matter of the webinar, We have with us two very important people. One is Dr. Girdhar Rao from the Azim Premji University, Bangalore. Dr. Rao was formerly associated with the Indian Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, where he taught language and literature. He did his PhD from the University of Hyderabad on science fiction. As a research worker and academic working in the field of science fiction, Dr. Rao has not only delivered and delineated the aesthetics of such writing, but also worked towards building a community of speakers through his study and practice of the Esperanto movement. He is also committed to a prevalent cultural praxis and the rights of individuality, both as nested and continuum. I welcome Professor Girdhar Rao to the webinar and a very good morning to you. The second speaker, Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma. Professor Sharma retired as Vice Principal, North Guwahati College. He was also the Associate Professor in the Department of Physics, North Guwahati College. He was the Joint Secretary of the All India People's Science Network from 2006 to 2017. At present, he is member of the Executive Council of the All India People's Science Network. He is an activist of the People's Science Movement, and through his active academic life, Professor Sharma worked tirelessly to build new ideas in his chosen areas of the physical and chemical sciences. He also stood in favor of an intellectually robust, analytical bent of mind. I welcome Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma to the webinar and a very good morning to you also. I now request our principal, Dr. Suranjan Sharma sir, to formally inaugurate the webinar and put forward his brief comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sengupta. Very good morning, everyone. I wish to welcome all of you to this national webinar on science fiction in an age of crisis, organized by IPSC cell of our Damdama College, Kamrup, Assam. The webinar has been organized to explore the importance of science fiction now more than ever, as we all are facing the challenging time due to global COVID-19 pandemic. We have three distinguished scholars as resource persons of this webinar, namely Dr. Tapan Kumar Sharma, former Joint Secretary, All India People Science Network and People Science Movement activist. Dr. Girdhar Rao, Professor Azim University, Azim Premji University, Bangalore, and Dr. Dineshchandra Goswami, Professor, Physicist, Author, and Polymath. I wish to welcome and thank all the resource persons for joining the webinar. I also welcome the young research scholars who are going to present their paper in this webinar. We know that science fiction provides us with a window through which to confront crisis. COVID-19 pandemic will not obviously end the human race. It will not kill everyone, but it will change the economy of the world, the healthcare system of the countries, and the environment of the world. Science fiction indicates that humans have the capacity to find hope in the most desperate of situations. Science fiction shows us a way forward even when every door around us seems to shut. Science fiction helps us to face the idea of a world change, how to live through it, despite of uncertainty. It shows us how to deal with our anxiety instead of suppressing it. American writer and professor of biochemistry Isaac Asimov defined Science fiction as that branch of literature which deals with the reaction of human beings to changes in science and technology. Science fiction is a genre of speculative fiction that typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universes, and extraterrestrial life. The National Science Foundation, in one of its survey conducted in 2001, found that people who read or prefer science fiction may think about or relate to science differently than other people. Science fiction had its beginnings in ancient times when the line between myth and fact was blurred. Written in the 2nd century CE by the satirist Lucian, a true story contains many themes and tropes characteristics of modern science fiction, including travel to other worlds, extraterrestrial life forms, interplanetary warfare, and artificial life. Some consider it the first science fiction novel. Many critics consider H.G. Wells one of the science fiction's most important authors and or even the Shakespeare of science fiction. Science fiction fandom is the community of the literature of ideas, the culture in which new ideas emerge and grow before being released into society at large. Members of this community, its fans, are often in contact with each other at conventions or clubs through print or online resources. Science fiction's great rise in popularity during the first half of the 20th century was closely tied to the popular respect paid to science at that time, as well as the rapid pace of technological innovation and new inventions. Science fiction has often predicted scientific and technological progress. Some works predict that new inventions and progress will tend to improve life and society. For instance, the stories of Arthur C. Clarke and Star Trek. Others, such as H.G. Wells' The Time Machine and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, warn against possible negative consequences. Science fiction has historically been subdivided between hard science fiction and soft science fiction, with the division centering on the feasibility of the science central to the story. However, the distinction has come under the increasing scrutiny in the 20th century. Stories that focus explicitly on physics, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering tend to be considered hard science fiction, while stories that focus on botany, zoology, and the social sciences, etc., tend to be categorized as soft regardless of the relative rigor of the science. I hope the resource persons will enlighten us through their lectures in this two-day national webinar. I also hope that the new research scholars who joined as paper presenter in this seminar will give us ideas about the prospects of the science fiction in this bad situation due to COVID-19 pandemic. I wish all will be enlightened through this webinar. I thank the convener of this webinar, Dr. Saurabh Sengupta, Mr. Rajiv Monto, and Dr. Bobita Kolika, and technical convener, Mr. Teddy Bharali, for their endeavor to organize this webinar for the greater benefit of general masses. Thank you, and once again, thanking all the resource persons for joining in this webinar. Thanking all.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Suranjan Sharma, sir. May I now invite our first speaker, Dr. Giridhar Rao, to put forward his ideas in this webinar. Dr. Rao.
Thank you. Dr. Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma sir, Principal Dr. Suranjan Sharma sir, Dr. Saurav Sengupta, convener and fellow conveners, fellow teachers of the college, fellow presenters, friends, students, good morning. From 2,500 kilometers away, I'm speaking from Bangalore, where it is the monsoon and it is very green, but Assam is probably greener. So it's a pleasure to be in the same space as all of you. What I wanted to do in the next half an hour or so is to uh, describe what kinds of tools for thinking, thought tools, as I'm calling them, what kinds of thought tools science fiction gives us in our times, and why it might be a valuable resource in this age, as Principal Sir was saying, in this age of crisis, what kinds of help and understanding we can get through science fiction. In order to do that, I wanted to give a bit of information, share information on how we are using science fiction in our university as a course, as part of the MA program, and what kinds of uses or effect it has had on on our students. In order to do that, I have to step back a little and give a brief background of the kinds of students or the kind of university that Azim Premji University is. So the first part is about what kind of university we have developed here or are developing here. The second part is about the science fiction courses themselves. So in order to do that, let me just step back to 20 years ago, to 2000. The year 2000 is when the Azim Premji Foundation, the foundation, not the university, the Azim Premji Foundation was set up in order to contribute to school education in rural India, government school education in rural India. That was the purpose of the foundation. Very soon they found that they didn't have professionals for the task. They needed teachers, they needed teacher educators, they needed people to design curriculum, they needed people to monitor and evaluate those curriculums. All these were skills that were simply not available in our education domain, education space. That is why 10 years it took. And in 2010, the university was started in order to develop professionals specifically for the work of the foundation. Very soon, as soon as the university was developing, the idea about the university was developing, it became clear that education is not a standalone entity. It is tightly connected to so many other developments and factors in society. So a school of education by itself as a standalone school would not be of much use. That's why a school of development was also started and a school of policy and governance also started. And in all these three schools, MA programs are offered in our university. The funding for the university comes from the foundation itself. So my salary, for example, the operational costs of the university, for example, all these come from the foundation. They don't need to be recovered from the student fees. And this transformed our admission process completely with far-reaching effects, because we no longer had to worry whether the student could pay the fees or not. As a result, we were free to take students who were promising, irrespective of whether they could afford the fees of the college or not. And that has had an interesting consequence on the diversity of the students that we have in our university. I have some figures here just to share what kind of diversity was possible. So currently, for example, in the 2019 batch, 51% of the students are from rural India or small towns. students have come from 26 of the 29 Indian states. 57% of the students were women, are women. 55% have received financial assistance. 21% of the students have had 2 years or more of work experience. So it's quite a diverse group of students that we have taken into our university. And that diversity brings with it both opportunities and challenges. The opportunities are fantastic. For example, I do a language diversity audit every semester in my courses, just to see how many languages are there in the room. In last year, in 2019, in a class of 46 students, when I asked them to list all the languages that they knew, there were 35 language names. 35 language names, 35 distinct language names in a class of 46, which is a fabulous diversity, which as a resource, it should be seen as a major resource. So that is the kind of context in which we are teaching. Many of the students are first generation learners. Many are from backgrounds that were not educationally very good, but they are there in the university. And the teaching is happening with all kinds of support systems in place so that these students benefit from it. Now, why I'm giving this picture of diversity is that it is precisely this diversity that allows us to propose a certain kind of science fiction course, a certain kind of teaching of science fiction that uses that strength of the class of diversity and reinforces the idea that I may be 2,500 kilometers away from you, but the space that we share, the territory that we share, is still called India. That we have a common idea of India, that we have a common set of values called constitutional values. We have a common democratic obligation as a duty as a citizen. And all those are traits that are very much in connection, very much in alignment with the social purpose of the university. Both the foundation and the university have an explicit social purpose, which is to help to build a more just, equitable, sustainable, humane society. So just, equitable, sustainable, humane society. With these imperatives, with these aims in mind, a course like the science fiction course contributes to those values. That is what I meant by saying that science fiction has a role to play in a much larger arena than it first seems. As Principal Sir was saying, the science fiction goes back a long way. It can go back a couple of thousand years ago, or it can come to you can start with the modern period with, let's say, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is often another starting point for many people to think about science fiction. In any case, on the face of it, on the surface, science fiction does not seem a very promising candidate for thinking about big things like democracy and citizenship and identity. Because what are the popular ideas, what are the first impressions about science fiction that most people have? I have a list of some of those from something I wrote a few years ago. So let me read out that little bit from that paper. The first impression that most people have when you say science fiction is aliens, creatures from another planet. Yeah, and those creatures from another planet often come in three popular, what shall we say, flavors. Cute aliens, pretty cute, furry aliens. Mummy, there's a funny little creature in the garden, that kind of alien. Then there are monstrous aliens. A single scream should do nicely. Mommy. And then there are even the third kind of aliens, which are both cuddly and deadly. Cuddly. Mummy, that cute furry monster just ate our dog. So that's the third kind of alien. right? Aliens are one image in the popular imagination of what science fiction is. Second is our gadgets, right? Everybody thinks of gadgets when they really sleek-looking, dangerous-looking gadgets which have wonderful powers. So there is a sentence from a 1957 novel, not even new, Citizen of the Galaxy by Robert Heinlein. I used, Thorby stated, I'm quoting from that line, from that novel, a Mark 19 one-stage target seeker made by Bethel Antares and armed with a 20 megaton plutonium warhead. I launched a timed shot on closing to beaming range on collision curve prediction. There's a recent novel by Sami Khan, Sami Ahmad Khan's Red Jihad from 2012, which is in the same tradition of what Arthur Clarke, another great science fiction writer, Principal Sir mentioned Isaac Asimov. Arthur C. Clarke is another such major figure. What Arthur Clarke once called um, uh, gleaming weapons and beautiful explosions. Yeah, so that's the second image that comes to mind when we think about science fiction. A third image are that these weapons of mass destruction are usually mounted on sleek spaceships, right? That's the third image of space travel that comes to mind when we think about science fiction. Yeah. So these are sleek spaceships, which, when they are not battling those aliens that we just talked about, are exploring new planets, new parts of the universe, colonizing new worlds, opening up new frontiers, much like the American West, right? And really recreating the myth of the American West in various ways. Principal Sir mentioned Star Trek. Star Trek is exactly in that tradition of making the American West go to space, right? So that's the third image that people have when they think about science fiction, right? Fourth, all this technology that science fiction has, yeah, it promises to deliver us into a brave new world. Principal Sir mentioned this novel by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. It promises, all this technology promises us to develop a vaccine for COVID-19, um, uh, something that will eliminate cancer from this world and stuff like that, right? So poverty, war, disease are expected to be history in these fantastic new worlds. That's another promise. That's another part of the imagination of the science fiction. This might be what Americans call gosh, wow, science fiction, technocratic utopias driven by endless, limitless sources of energy, right? And endless consumerism also. The old magazine titles from the golden age of science fiction, the 1930s to 1950s, that period had magazine titles that tell you what kind of world is being promised by science fiction. Here are some of the magazine titles: Astounding Stories, Comet Stories, Cosmic Stories, Dynamic Science Stories, Fantastic Adventures, Future Fiction, Marvel Science Stories, Startling Stories, Stirring Science Stories, and Super Science Stories. And you can see what kind of image of science fiction is built in the popular imagination with magazine titles like this, right? But that's not the only kind of world that science fiction promises. In the modern period, we know that science fiction has also promised very dark worlds, right? These are um, these genetically modified fruits of knowledge result in corporate dystopias also, right? In which the human spirit has been enslaved, or think about Matrix, right? Or think about Terminator films, right? Science fiction movies where human spirit has been enslaved and devastated worlds laid waste by human stupidity and greed, right? These techno-gothic landscapes. That's yet another imagination of science fiction, yet another image of science fiction that people have. And a final, one last association that people have with science fiction in the popular imagination is of uh, clones, robots, cyborgs, androids, replicants, X-Men, right? You know the movies, right? It's an age-old fantasy of playing God, which is why I said maybe Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the ancestor, is one of the major ancestors for science fiction, because that was Victor Frankenstein playing God, creating life, right? These creatures of man, it's men who have depicted as the creators of all this, right? They make like the aliens in the first mention of the kinds of aliens. They may be friendly aliens, they may be friendly creatures, these creatures that humans have created, eager to do human bidding and prone to bursts of genius and affection. Think about many of the robots in Isaac Asimov's short stories. Or they may be, or differently, completely opposite. They may be hostile progeny of human, of man, asking difficult existential questions. Why have you made me? Why have you promoted me to life? Yeah? What gave you the right to play God? So they can ask these questions also. So there are these two different kinds of creatures that humans have created. Yeah? And in a in Hollywood, for example, many of these creations resemble one of the previous governors of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who played Terminator. Right? So with this kind of public imagination of science fiction, as all kinds of colorful and only sensational images that people have about science fiction, how can we take any serious? How can we take any claim seriously that science fiction actually offers ways of thinking about this, about the world, in constructive ways that can address the, say, the questions I mentioned earlier, the social vision that I mentioned earlier of creating a just, equitable, sustainable, humane society, right? So it sets up a kind of paradox, right? On the one hand, there is this image of science fiction, or images of public images of science fiction, and on the other hand, there is this claim that it can actually address much more serious questions without actually stopping being science fiction. While continuing to be science fiction, it can do these amazing things. And that is where I want to move to in the last part of this talk, to talk about some of the places where science fiction seems to actually provide food for thought. We keep saying that one of the aims of education is to develop critical thinking, right? So uh, how is science fiction helping to develop critical thinking in our times especially? So I have a few examples of that, of what kind of critical thinking we are talking about. So let me go back to that paper that I have written about what kind of um, thought tools that science fiction can offer. One thing is quite clear to anybody who reads science fiction, uh, that science fiction may propose a nowhere, a place that does not actually exist anywhere. But if you look at it closely, it turns out to be that nowhere, to play with words, breaks down into now here. The nowhere becomes the now here. It becomes our present, right? Often these dystopias um, or utopias turn out to be commentaries on the present, right? The nowhere of dystopia and utopia turns out to be here and now. The elsewhere, somewhere else, and the other in science fiction, the creature that human beings have created, the X-Men of the movies, right? They turn out to be recognizably us, people like us, right? As well as completely different. So, for example, let me read out a short exchange from a science fiction classic called Dune, D-U-N-E, yeah, from 1965, by an American writer called Frank Herbert, Herbert. So in Dune, it is set on a desert world, and there is a duke who is offering his friendship to Stilgar. Stilgar is the name of the leader of the desert tribe to whom the Duke is offering his friendship. Here is how Stilgar reacts. Remember, this is a desert world called Dune. The Duke is an outsider from another world. He has come here and is offering his friendship to Stilgar, the tribe leader. And this is how Stilgar reacts. Stilgar stared at the Duke, then slowly pulled aside his veil, revealing a thin nose and a full-lipped mouth in a glistening black beard. Deliberately, he bent over the end of the table and spat on its polished surface. Spat on its polished surface. As the Duke's men start to rise angrily, the Duke's lieutenant, who has lived with the tribe, right, shouts, Hold! Into the sudden charged stillness, the lieutenant said, We thank you, Stilgar, for the gift of your body's moisture. We accept it in the spirit with which it is given. And he spat on the table in front of the Duke. Aside to the Duke, he said, Remember, sir, how precious water is here. That was a token of respect. Now, science fiction is full of such first contact stories between two cultures who have never met before, or have only heard of each other before, and have a lot of prejudices, lot of hostility, lot of mutual suspicion. Right? These are called first contact stories in science fiction literature. These first contact stories of cultures and civilizations coming into contact, uncomprehending contact, right, are really a metaphor of our times. If we turn to our world of intense identity politics and deep schisms, divisions between people, the value of these tools should not be underestimated. A paragraph like that, an episode like that, remains in the mind of the reader long after the novel is gone, long after the novel is over, and it becomes a metaphor of understanding, offering a way of offering a space of saying, I will find out more, I will not judge. Right? Incidentally, I'll put a footnote here, which is that Dr. Saurabh Sengupta mentioned my work with the Esperanto movement. The Esperanto community, worldwide community, is precisely such a community which tries to build cultural dialogue, intercultural dialogue, arguing that how can you claim to know what a Japanese person is if you have not had a dialogue with that person? How can they claim to know somebody from Brazil until the Japanese person has had a conversation with the Brazilian person? And how is that to be possible at all in a world where there is only prejudice, there is no dialogue possible? So that is what actually led me to Esperanto, the science fiction enterprise of building such thought tools. And here was a linguistic resource called Esperanto, which contributed to building such a understanding, such a dialogue. So I saw a natural connection, natural fit between the thinking I was doing about science fiction and the possibilities of Esperanto as a contributor to that. And indeed, I discovered, to continue that footnote, indeed, I discovered that there was some very interesting science fiction written in Esperanto. So I thought I should try and learn the language in order to read the science fiction in it. And sure enough, that enterprise was very rewarding. There is some very interesting science fiction. In fact, a few hours ago, I was in conversation with a Russian friend who has a publishing house in Moscow, which has published, among other things, Russian science fiction in Esperanto translation. Some of you science fiction readers will have heard of the Strugatsky brothers, the Boris and Arkady Strugatsky, who wrote several classic science fiction novels, which are available in English translation because we don't normally. We are not people who, not many of us are familiar with Russian. I have read them in Esperanto translation thanks to this Dima Dmitry Shevchenko, my friend who runs the publishing house in Moscow. In fact, I told him a few hours ago when we were talking online, of course, that in a few hours I will be talking in a webinar uh, to friends 2,500 kilometers away, and I will certainly mention your publishing house. To come back to the idea that intercultural contact can be furthered by a language project like Esperanto. So that is what drew me to Esperanto. And it took me back to science fiction with a renewed understanding that such thought tools were part of science fiction's toolkit, that it offered a set of resources, among which were these kinds of tools, right? Another set of issues. Take the first 2 decades of this century. We are in 2020 now. The first 2 decades of the century have been marked by an increased awareness, right, of how fragile the world is, right? The natural resources of this world are, especially water, but not just water, right? And serious efforts, at least among some people, to find other viable alternative sources of energy. Um, there is the imminent irreversibility of climate change. Yeah. In our own country, in India, much of our modernity, of how we became a modern nation, was invested in large-scale projects. Right? Think of the Green Revolution. Think of huge Bhakra Nangal Dam mega projects. Right? Technocratic solutions. But our post-modernity, this 21st century, we have begun to see that those projects have had a huge cost to the environment, have had a huge cost to people's lives, right? The displacement of hundreds of thousands of people, lakhs of people, millions of people by these mega projects. All these are major human costs, and there are major environmental costs, planetary costs. So our postmodernity, in contrast with our modernity, our postmodernity has consisted of questioning this development, the model of development that was. Right? A lot of science fiction does precisely that. I was thinking of a novel published a few years ago called 2312, 2312. It was published in 2012, and it was set in 2312 by Kim Stanley Robinson, an excellent novelist. If you haven't read him, please do. Robinson, Robinson, Kim Stanley Robinson. So now that is a novel that takes this idea of a different model of development, a tale of caution and possibility, quite seriously. That's yet another source of thought tools that science fiction offers us. Yeah, remember, because we live in a world where millions of lives and livelihoods and ways of life are being devalued, marginalized, excluded, and destroyed by a combination of state policies, state repression, and savage globalization. Extract, right? This is a vision of the world that science fiction has often used. Think about James Cameron's 2009 movie, Avatar. Right? I'm sure many of you have watched the movie, AVATAR, Avatar. It depicts one such version of this particular combination of savage exploitation um, in combination with state apparatus. Right? A great deal of contemporary science fiction articulates this bleak socio-political landscape, as well as the heroic solidarities which resist these juggernauts, these threatening combination of forces of savage globalization and state repression. Right? Remember that Avatar's depiction of that reality on that planet caused some NGOs working in Odisha with the cones to write to him, to write to James Cameron and say that this is exactly what is happening to our landscape in Odisha. Please come and do something about it. And he did. He came and made a public statement about this, and that was an amazing moment of life meeting art, and science fiction specifically, science fictional art meeting life, actually um, contributing to that solidarity that I just spoke about. Yeah? So these understandings of nature, how genres get formed and then get used. Uh, and, uh, uh, and these ways of thinking about the past, the present, and the future that science fiction has offered me, uh, uh, they have been a major source of satisfaction to me, of seeing how what I read as a teenager and enjoyed as tales of adventure, tales of improbable tales, actually have a strange trajectory through my own life of being a teacher and thinking about the world as as it uh, as it actually is. Right? Let me end with with an unusual uh, uh, part of the genre, namely a poem. Right? Science fiction, as you know, is largely a, a, a genre with short stories, novels, a little bit of theater, plenty of films, and now in the modern age, computer gaming, right? But very little poetry is science fictional, right? So here is a poem which is science fictional. By the way, one science fictional poem many of you English literature types have already been exposed to, namely W.H. Auden's The Unknown Citizen. If you haven't read The Unknown Citizen, please do. It's quite a good poem, which depicts a certain view of modern life, right? But that's quite a well-known example. Let me end with an example that you maybe may not have heard about. It's by an American poet called Jeffrey McDaniel. And probably, I'm not sure if any of you have probably heard of it. But it's called the poem is called The Quiet World. It's a 1998 poem, so relatively recent. 1998 poem, The Quiet World. This is how it goes. In an effort to get people to look into each other's eyes more, and also to appease the mutes, the government has decided to allot each person exactly 167 words per day. The government has decided to allot each person exactly 167 words per day. When the phone rings, I put it to my ear without saying hello. In the restaurant, I point at chicken noodle soup. I point at chicken noodle soup. I am adjusting well to the new way. Late at night, I call my long distance lover, proudly say, I only used 59 today. I saved the rest for you. When she does not respond, when she doesn't respond, I know she has used up all her words. So I slowly whisper, I love you, 32 and a third times. After that, we just sit on the line and listen to each other breathe. Thank you. You need to unmute, Saurav.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Giridhar Rao. You have been a wonderful speaker, and particularly the last part, the conclusion, is tremendously effective. I mean, it says a lot of things without saying a lot of things, and it is wonderful. The basic point that I actually and really appreciate about this lecture, of course, is the basic questions that you think that science fiction raises, questions about our existential problem, questions about the environmental problem, questions about who we are and what we should do from now, and can we build a better future for ourselves, or our future is all gone and all settled and dusted. Now, this is a very pertinent question, and I thank you, Professor Giridhar Rao, for giving us such beautiful highlights into both your work and what you do as a university professor at Azim Premji University. We have actually a very important role model from where we can learn a lot of things. Education as a means of democratic brotherhood was, of course, conceptualized by many of our social thinkers, but probably never executed on the ground level like this. And this is very significant, where no students actually have to pay anything, almost nothing, to pursue their education. This is indeed a very big example of trust and support that an educational institution can actually provide to the society. Thank you, Professor Rao. May I now invite our next speaker, Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma, to put forward his brief points. Professor Sharma.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Still 8 minutes to 12 p.m. So, at the very beginning, respected Dr. Suranjan Sharma, Principal of Damdama College. Also, Dr. Giridhar Rao, Azim Premji University. I am very happy and I learned many things from your speech. Also, Dr. Saurabh Sengupta and dear participant, I heard some 400 participants are still participating, listening, and viewing. I am grateful to all of you, especially IQSC cell of Damdama College, for inviting me to appear before you speak few things. I was a little bit worried, and at the same time, I'm very happy to be here because I have been in people science movement for last 32 to 35 years, since 1987. Subject is very, very large. Science fiction in the age of crisis. Science fiction itself is a huge subject, and the age of crisis is another huge subject. It will take, say, 10, 20 hours to cover all of this. I will highlight few small things. Hope you will enjoy it. In an ideal situation, I like to talk before a audience where I can talk eye to eye. I can talk face to face. In that case, I can see them. I get the feedback immediately and I can change accordingly. Anyway, I won't like to define science fiction. The learned audience and participant, they already gone through many of the definition of it. Basically, it is a fiction. Fiction combined with science, combined with speculative science, combined with futuristic science. It tells how future science will be, how future society will be. That is all about science fiction. Why this subject is? I first got a phone call from Dr. Savitri Sakia, followed by a phone from Saurabh Sengupta, and I was told that in new CBSE syllabus in Assamese subject, there is a portion called science fiction. I got excited to know this. I asked, already it is? No, it will be in 5th semester in coming year. I have gone through the syllabus. I saw the syllabus. It is some part of history of science fiction as well as the history of science fiction in Assamese literature. Why suddenly this introspection? Why suddenly this wiseness? That science fiction should be part of a subject like Assamese literature. The reason behind that point I will highlight. Till 1980s, after completion of university degree, I was starting teaching in a college. In those days, I saw all participants may not, we observe one thing. Whenever there is a talk, whenever there is a speech, or even a group talk in a adda or a restaurant discussion, intellectual discussion, all talks centered around, if you can quote from a Shakespeare drama, if you can quote from Bhavabhuti or Kalidas, if you can recite a Sanskrit slok, you can quote from them, you are supposed to be a cultured person. You are supposed to be a wise man. That was the trend. Suddenly there was a change I saw. In late 80s or beginning of 90s, the change is visible step by step, day by day. The intellectual talks now changing. Along with the Shakespeare, you must quote from Einstein. The discussion should talk around, say, black hole and many space travel and many other things. Earlier, it was not part of intellectual discussion. How this happen? This is not in my society, in society of Assam or India. The same thing was in Western society also. In 1959, there is a lecture in Oxford University. Exact date was 7 May. In Redo lecture, C.P. Snow, as a well-known scientist, is a chemist, also is a novelist. He appeared for a lecture. A lecture was called Redo lecture. The subject was two culture and TWO2, two culture and scientific revolution. There he mentioned and draw attention from world community. He mentioned that there is a vast, the whole Western society, intellectual society is divided into two parts. One is so-called arts or humanities, other is scientific thinking. The gap is huge. He gave some interesting example. He talked, whenever I talk to a very intelligent person from humanities, otherwise his contribution is vast. But if you ask them politely, what is second law of thermodynamics? The answer is negative. Either they did not heard it, or even if they heard it, they cannot explain it or no idea about second law of thermodynamics. C.P. Snow shows it is the equivalent question of what Shakespeare is in humanities. He further gave one example. He came down, he says, very small things like what velocity is, what mass is, what acceleration is. A literate man hardly able to, maybe one person can able to give some explanation to those words. But this very particular question is similar to, do you know how to read? Do you know ABCD? In humanities. The gulf is very big. The two culture is separated wide apart. He says, this is the reason, the two cultural separation is the reason why many of the social problem is not able to answer, address properly. Later on, this lecture is printed as a two cultures and scientific revolution. Many criticism also came. And then in 1963, lecture was in 59, book was in 62. And after receiving huge response, he wrote a new book, Two Culture and a Second Look. After that, I think it was a path-breaking lecture. It was a path-breaking book. The whole Western culture start thinking along that line. The result shows here in 2020 that our syllabus is changing slowly, and the gap between two cultures is narrowing down. Today, after 1959, physics changed a lot. Today, cultured people not only say, earlier years people frequently quoted from Shakespeare. Today, people frequently talk about not only this black hole, but also wormhole, teletransportation, and many things, which are the present trend of modern science. Okay, this is one point I wanted to highlight. Next one, quickly I am what is there in scientific literature in Assamese language, Assamese literature. Scientific literature is, we can divide in three parts, mainly scientific papers, scientific books that can only be understood by technical person. A paper on relativity is there are a lot of technical jargon. There are a lot of mathematics can only understand by a people of that particular discipline. But there are thousands of books on relativity. It is meant for ordinary people. Anybody can read and anybody can understand. This too belongs to the scientific literature. Third part is science fiction. In Western culture, science fiction dates back many years, that I will tell later here. In Assamese, there is a hundreds of books on science fiction, that I will tell. And there is some good papers, good articles on it. Shama Prasad Sharma wrote one article. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir. We
You
can hear you also.
I can carry on. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Shama Prasad Sharma wrote development of scientific literature in major Indian language with specific reference to Assamese. This is written in 1889, and 30 years already passed. So many more scientific literature there in Assamese language. Ahom Sahitya Sabha, Ahom Sahitya Sabha likhile Asamiya Bhashat Bigyan Charcha. Honorable Jyoti Mohanty, there is an article on research paper on Assamese scientific literature, a critical survey. It was done in 2006. There is a book written by Dinesh Vaishya, Asamiya Bigyan Sahitya. It is recommended in syllabus of Assamese syllabus of this part. Paramananda Majumdar, a edited book on Asamot Bigyan Charchar Dhara. Khiradhar Barua, he is not there today, perhaps he will be tomorrow attending the seminar. He has lot of contribution of Assamese scientific literature. He wrote on Asamiya Bigyan Sahitya, Otitor Pora Bortomanoloi. He will be the right person, he will speak tomorrow. Also, Anekhan kitab ase Asamiya Kalpa Bigyan Sahitya, A.K. Giyasuddin Ahmed. In India, in major Indian languages, science fiction dates back, I am not sure, it is 1884 to 1888. Piyush Paba in Madhya Pradesh, name of a journal. There, some Ambika Datta he wrote about Chanda Vijan. In Assamese, all that science fiction is found in 1914. Scientific literature in Assamese, it is before British period, Horsley Bitter number, Ghora Ninat, or much before that, many other scientific literature there in Assamese. But when we say science fiction, it dates back to 1940. Ambika Giri Rai Chaudhary, it's small booklet, not exactly book. তেওঁ লিখিছিলে জগতৰ শেষ আদৰ্শ য'ত আছে organ transplantation and space travel. This is interesting. At that time, organ transplantation was not there in practice, not heard. Also, space travel was not there in practice, but he wrote about it in 1914. But most people said Hari Prasad Baruar Birasotiyar Dek in 1937 is the first story, short story in Assamese that can be classified as science fiction. Someone went to Brihaspati and had talked with their Brihaspati civilization. Honourable Salia Miniloid is the first book on Pratham Upanyas 1950 যিখন আমাৰ কোৰ্সত এইবাৰ ভৰাইছে তেনেকৈ শব্দ প্ৰদূষণ আন এখন সৌৰভ চলিয়াৰ কিতাপ যিখনো ইয়াত সিলেবাসত ভৰোৱা হৈছে বাকিখিনি কাইলৈ ছাৰহতে ক'ব কাইলৈ আমাৰ কাৰণে আৰু এটা সৌভাগ্যৰ কথা Dinesh Chandra Goswami he can be say classified in Shakespeare of Assamese science fiction writing. He has 10 different books on I mean novel. He have 10 novels on science fiction, 6 books on science fiction stories. He translated 7 books based on science fiction. তেওঁ নাটকো লিখিছে তেওঁ শিশু সাহিত্যও আছে 90খন গ্ৰন্থৰ ওপৰ গ্ৰন্থ তেখেতৰ আছে science fiction related. Fortunately, he will be there in this workshop tomorrow. You will be able to listen from Dr. Dinesh Goswami directly. আৰু বহুত আছে নৱকান্ত বৰুৱাৰ অপদাৰ্থ অমূল্য হাজৰিকাৰ কেইবাখনো গ্ৰন্থ শান্তনু তামলী সিলেবাসত আছে আপোনালোকে পঢ়িবলৈ পাব শ্যামাপ্ৰসাদ শৰ্মা ৰথিন গোস্বামী বন্দিতা ফুকন অভিজিত শৰ্মা বৰুৱা লক্ষীনন্দন বৰা ক্ষীৰধৰ বৰুৱা will be tomorrow here এখিনি সমুকে এখিনি মই ক্ষীৰধৰ বৰুৱা ছাৰহতে বৰ ধুনীয়াকে ক'ব মই কৈছিলো হোৱাটছ মই ডিফাইন নকৰো বুলি কৈছিলো তথাপিতো এটা বাক্য ক'লো I was reluctant to define what science fiction is. Still, I defined in a one line. But I should say what science fiction is not. In Mahabharata and in other epics, Narada, he traveled with the Theki, Pushpakrat, these are not belong to science fiction. This should be very clear. Asamiya Loko Sahitya মৌকুঁৱৰী সাধুত তাত স্পষ্টকে উল্লেখ আছে যে এটা কণীৰ পৰা শিশুৰ জন্ম হৈছে বাহিৰত থকা চৰাই কণীৰ পৰা যদি হেতু সায়েন্স ফিকশন হয় তেতিয়াহলে ক'বলগীয়া নাই in any civilization in any culture there are so many folk tales somebody will try to classify them as science fiction but that is not science fiction. In Western world, I don't want to go for detailed list of how all this is. But still, there is a book called The Dream. It is written by Kepler. It is written around 1600. Exact date will be 1610, but it is published in 1634. Why I am mentioning this book? Many people want to say that Kepler's The Dream is the first science fiction book in the world. Kepler was a living real scientist of at that era. He discovered many things. He talked about three planetary law is the beginning of the new scientific age, based on which Newton discovered his famous law of gravitation. He combined his actual scientific discovery along with some imagination. He had a travel book to moon, and this dream is the book on moon, the structure of moon, how is there any life from in moon, all about everything is described there. Then Mary Shelley, you have heard about Shelley, Byron Shelley, all about this. But Mary Shelley is the wife of Shelley. Many other critics says Mary Shelley is the first man who contributed to the science fiction. His book on Frankenstein. Every literate person, from humanities or otherwise, can talk about Frankenstein. His another book is Last Man. But two persons, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, whom I would like to say as the real man of, real hero of science fiction writing. Every listener listening to us, attending the workshop, must have read about these two persons, also their works. Jules Verne's kitab bilak, by H.G. also time kitab bilak, প্রায় বিলাকেই বাস্তবত পরিণত হয়েছে। 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This is written by Jules Verne. He talked about Nautilus. Nautilus was a ship going below the water level. At that time, there was no submarine. A submarine was later, after 100 years, submarine is discovered. 5 weeks in a balloon. Balloon was not there at that time. A journey to the moon. That was not there. A journey to the moon is based on pure science. He talked about caverite. It's a material that can block gravity. Say, we have a magnet, we have a nail, it will attack. But there is a shielding by another magnetic material, the attraction will be zero. Magnetic field is shielded. If you can shield this cup by the hand or by a cavorite, is a material that blocks gravity, it will go towards the moon. That is the idea of journey to the moon. And after 100 years, the cavorite was not discovered till today, but moon journey becomes reality. I will highlight one interesting point. Everyone of attending here will enjoy it very much. Most successful science fiction they predict and it happens. What I would like to say about it, prediction is not only business of this science fiction. Prediction is very integral to hard science, actual science, I mean. Let me explain, you will enjoy. If science can predict, if a scientific can predict too many things, that is, the theory is tested on time. Give me one example. Let me give one interesting example. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
I can continue. Till the end of 1700th century, men knew only 5 planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth. We cannot see Earth in the sky because we are standing there. Jupiter and Saturn, and also Mars. These 5 planets we can see. This is visible to naked eye. Men from cave age to till today, they knew it. They can be viewed through the naked eye. But problem is, Uranus and Neptune is discovered after the discovery of telescope. Uranus is discovered by telescope accidentally, but no, Neptune was not discovered by telescope. Neptune is discovered by desktop scientists. What is desktop scientist? Desktop scientist is, they never looked to the sky. They took a pen, they took a notebook and start calculating, and suddenly say there is a planet beyond Uranus. And you can see it through your telescope. They request some of the men in observatory sitting in front of a telescope, look at the sky, look at this position of sky, you will see a new planet. And it is there, I am predicting. It is through the calculation. And Neptune was really discovered. Neptune is discovered by desktop scientists. The story goes like this. After discovery of Uranus, scientists keep observing the Uranus and plotted their orbit. But this orbit can be calculated through mathematics also. These 2 orbits should coincide. One observed orbit, other calculated orbit. But for Neptune, these 2 orbit is not coincide. Either calculation is, observation is wrong, or Newton theory of gravity is wrong, based on which the orbit is calculated. But scientists were pretty sure that neither is wrong. Observation is exact and accurate, and this also Newton theory. Newton theory is based, already tested. It must be true. Then what is wrong? Then scientists keep thinking, and finally they decide there is another huge planet that disturbed this orbit of this Uranus. So they start calculating. Finally, on calculation, they discovered there is another planet which disturbs the orbit of Uranus. Finally, the name of the scientist who discovered this is Levier, who calculated it, and finally it was discovered. Same thing happened. You heard about, I'm jumbling with the words. I often forget. I forget the name of Saurabh Chandra Gupta like that. That's why. Periodic table in chemistry. At that time, 1869, when it was discovered, people knew, scientists knew only 63 elements. The 63 elements arranged in a very organized, logical manner. This is called periodic table. In periodic table, after organizing it, there is some gap. Why this gap? There should have been an element. So here is a prediction. In the periodic table, just below aluminium, there is a gap. And Mendeleev, who discovered this periodic table, he said there is an element here, name will be Eka aluminium. He predicted exactly. He says Eka aluminium will be density of gram per cc. It's a low, it will melt at low temperature. It will conductivity is very high. It will be shining. Accordingly, after first BS, gallium is discovered in, and that is placed at this empty place. Eka aluminium later of name as gallium. Many other element is discovered after this. Why am I highlighting gallium or discovery of Neptune and Pluto? Pluto also discovered in a predictive manner. Before discovery of Pluto, scientists calculated and said there is another planet. So Pluto is discovered accordingly. Pluto is spotted exact position, saw in an exact position through telescope photography after predicting its position exactly by the scientists. What I am saying, that prediction is actual measurement of a fruitfulness of a scientific theory. A scientific theory stood on time, accepted widely, if it is able to predict many other things exactly. There is a very interesting conversation between one scientist and his disciple. Saptar শিক্ষকৰ মাজত কথা বতৰা হৈছে. Saptai সুধিলে, sir, what is the most salient feature of a scientific theory? He says, before you answer you, I am asking one question. Please participate and listen and try to answer if possible. If you do not able to answer because of these technical things, just keep thinking. I am giving you two clock. One is permanently stopped. It is disordered. Another, it gives you exact, runs 1 minute part every 24 hours. প্রত্যেক দিনে 1 minute কে পাঁচ চলে. Which one you will prefer? There is a silence. Participant, are you thinking which one you will prefer?
Sir, actually, we have from the technical team, we have informed them to use the chat box. So I think as soon as they get the answers, they will comment in the chat box, sir. Thank you.
Right. I may not wait for, I may give the answer now. Anyway,
Yes, sir, you can carry forward, but I will inform you as soon as write something.
Had it been a traditional lecture, I would have waited for 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, no problem, sir. No issue.
Anyhow, so disciple says I will take the second clock, which goes in 24 hours, it goes 1 minute fast. Why? The sister said, he said, think twice, because the permanently stopped clocks give you exact time twice in a 24 hours. I repeat, the permanently stopped clocks give you exact time twice in a 24 hours. But clock will never give you exact time. It will give exact time after 2 years only. So you think twice. Then he think again. No, still I will take the second clock because it has a predictive power. I will take the second clock because it have a predictive power. কারণ 1 মিনিট আমি মাইনাস করি আমি একচুয়াল টাইমটো চাব পাৰিম আমি 24 ঘণ্টা এক্সাক্ট টাইম দিয়া ঘড়ীটোৰে কেতিয়ানো এক্সাক্ট টাইম দিছিলে কেতিয়াও গম নেপাম so what I am highlighting is a scientific theory is acceptable if it has predictive power say before Copernicus, before Newton, Kepler, Galileo, before heliocentric, সূৰ্যকেন্দ্ৰিক পৃথিৱীৰ বিশ্বৰ ধাৰণাটো accept হোৱা নাছিলে, this is one theory, this is heliocentric. In Ptolemaic time, in 200 AD, another theory was that prevailed for 2000 years, another theory was geocentric. Earth is fixed. Every day we see from morning to till evening, sound goes around the earth like other planets and stars. This is another theory. Using both the theory, we can predict when Grahan will happen, when next full moon will appear. But second theory is, Newton's theory is acceptable because we can predict presence of Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all this. But Ptolemaic theory is not able to predict all those. Today we have another theory. It is theory provided by Einstein. Einstein say apple falls or the moon goes around the sun, Earth goes around the sun not because of gravity, not because of attraction between Earth, science and moon, sun, Earth and moon. It is goes around the sun because of curvature of space-time. It's a technical jargon you all understand. The geometry of the universe is such that if we place an ant in a football, it will move in a curved path, not because of something attracting the ant, but because of the curvature of the football is like that. Earth goes round the sun, not because sun is attracting the earth, but because of the curvature of the space is like that. This is the explanation of Einstein. What I am saying, Einstein's theory is well accepted and proved beyond doubt. Einstein theory is better than Newton theory because Einstein theory can explain the orbit of Mercury very accurately than Newton's theory can. We can see a star beyond the sun. This is the sun. Beyond that there is a star. We cannot see, but we can still see because light comes in a bending way. Light bends near the sun. It is the discovery of It is a theoretical discovery of, it is a prediction of Einstein theory. Finally, it is proved. In 1999 total solar eclipse, people could really see a star that is blocked by the sun, but that can be seen because light bends. What I am trying to see, there are three theories that explain many things. One is theory of Ptolemy, that is geocentrics, theory of Newton, that is heliocentric, and theory of Einstein. Among these three, Einstein theory is best because it can explain many things. But there is some wrong understanding that Newton was wrong. Newton was not wrong. Newton applicability is this much. I say Newton's theory is applicable within an area of 10 kilometer. Beyond 10 kilometer, this 10 kilometer is analogy, not exact thing. Beyond 10 kilometer, things should be explained by Einstein theory. So Newton theory is still right. We keep sending satellite still today. This is based on Newtonian calculation, not based on Einstein calculation. If we start calculating on Einstein theory, it will be very complicated. It will be difficult. Anyway, what I am trying to prediction is heart of science. And also prediction is heart of scientific science fiction. Then 5 minutes I will spend on what future of what last part of this crisis. Difficult. It takes needs me another 3-4 hours, but I'll complete within 5 minutes. Is it possible or not? I don't know. I am not talking about the crisis I am facing this last 5-6 months. Crisis facing by new kind of coronavirus. The coronavirus was exist much before. The normal influenza is caused by corona, but this is new coronavirus. The disease is COVID-19. I'm not talking about this crisis. This crisis will be over in a few months, or maximum after in a year. It causes a lot of sense where we are talking, where we are attending a meeting, where we go out and taking marks and sanitize every movement. Some changes are there. It may persist for a long time. I don't want to discuss about this. I am pretty sure within a year, this crisis is over. But crisis is, many scientists insist that next 100 years will be very important for mankind. If you can sustain this 100 years, after 100 years or within 100 years, mankind will be totally abolished. It will come. Maybe along with other creatures. This is one prediction many scientists keep talking. This is due to global warming. Just after Second World War, Bertrand Russell, he wrote an essay, Future of Mankind. There he says 3 reasons how mankind will be if there is a third world war, mankind will be annihilated. Number one possibility. Second possibility, he said, mankind will be reduced to all barbaric civilization. Third possibility, he says, is there will be one world government that will rule every nation, every culture. Joe Barton Asen in his essays, The Future of Mankind, he says three possibilities. The essay is in the book Unpopular Essays. In his Unpopular Essays, article number 3, The Future of Mankind, and he talk about three possibilities. But Stephen Hawking, he says next 100 years will be crucial. Many scientists keep saying that mankind can be completely annihilated because of natural reasons. Some extraterrestrial, some near Earth object, some meteorite, some comet will hit the world and human civilization will be destroyed. Or some volcanic eruption, human civilization can be finished. This is natural reason. But other man-made reason is, one is global warming, second is artificial intelligence, third is biological warfare, fourth is nuclear warfare. All these are man-made. Human civilization may be exist due to this man-made thing. But last that I can conclude. Scientists are very optimistic. Latest scientific books are meant for all written in a popular style, highly technical, but it is written for the layman. The future of physics, physics of impossible, physics of mind, hyperspace, a scientific odyssey. These books are written by Parallel World, the future of mind. These books are written by, you have heard, Michio Kaku. It's a new man in the sense, his date of birth is 1947. He's a Japanese origin American scientist. He's a hardcore scientist, theoretical physicist, but he keeps popularizing science. Today, in an intellectual discussion, intellectual debate, if you quote from Michio Kaku, you are a cultured man. So to be cultured, I am repeating few of the books. Physics of future, physics of impossible, physics of mind. I will explain 3-4 lines. Hyperspace, a scientific odyssey, parallel worlds, the future of mind, beyond Einstein, the future of humanity. Recently, I have read Future of Humanity. There he gave an wonderful explanation. People keep talking that man will migrate to moon and man will migrate to Mars. But their environment not suitable to Mars. Two scientists can go spend 3 minutes with some special suit and come back. But to make a colony there, atmosphere should be like this. There should be water. That is extremely impossible to live in the moon and the Mars. But what Kaku says, listen, you'll be amazed. What Kaku says, the Mars and the moon will be slowly transformed. The tiltation of our Earth axis is 23.5 degrees. Can you make the tiltation of Mars axis to 23 degrees? Can you make the Mars, their poles will be curved? Amar Piaston is just like Earth. Then the atmosphere will built. Then many things will happen. Life form can survive there. Then we'll go there, we'll to make colony there. He says it is terraforming the Mars, terraforming the moon. I mean, moon will be, Mars will be make like Earth. This is possible by technology. A wonderful suggestion. Kapu appeared at least 10 different TV serials, 10 different radio talks. He's appeared for 100 different television serial and actual science fiction play. Many of you, may not all of you, have seen Dr. Few serials are there. Their teletransformation is there. There is a machine called, you have heard and explained many times also, time machine. You can go past using time machine. But teletransformation is that you can transform into a electromagnetic wave, put yourself in a machine and travel courses of kilometers. And there again you will be retransformed into an actual man. That means sending a man through Xeroxing. We can send a document paper through Xerox, but we cannot send a physical man by Xeroxing. If it is possible, then it will be called teletransportation. This physics of future, the future of humanity talk about teletransportation. Here I am. Many things are there. One or two point. A modern man, a modern cultured man, who is familiar to humanity and who is familiar to science as well, should understand the evolution of biological creature, evolution of man, evolution of human thinking. Evolution of human thinking means in cave people, what was their thinking, how science developed and all these things. And evolution of many other scientific thought and evolution of stars, Big Bang theory. A modern man, he may not be formal a part of science, he may be a part of humanities, but should have some information about all this human development of knowledge. I hope this endeavor of this syllabus making, new curriculum will be helpful. Our understanding to the world will change. I hope human civilization will last forever. There is a philosophy also. The philosophy is human civilization will never die. It will exist forever. One day, science predicts, and it is true, Earth will become a red giant. Its size will be up to the orbit of the Earth. Earth will be swallowed by the sun. So Earth will be destroyed. It is sure and certain. But by this time, man will migrate to another planet. Humanity will survive. Let this impossible be happen. Let your endeavor to canvassing the knowledge and effort of Donmona College of this seminar will be successful in these 2 days. If possible, I will listen to the science paper and I will be enriched myself. With many, many thanks. I afraid I could not give you justice. But somehow I could exchange few of my views with many thanks. Dr. Suranjan Sharma, please let me finish.
Thank
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for your brilliant lecture. You obviously talked
Sorry
about
to interrupt, sir. Sir, sorry to interrupt. Principal, sir.
Hello.
I think some sounds or background noise are coming from your side.
Just I will stop.
Okay, sir. Sure, sir.
Now is it okay? Hello.
It's all right, sir. It's all right. Thank you, sir. Convener, sir, you can continue.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for your talk. You talked about the heliocentric universe, the polemic universe, the space-time curvature, which is obviously the standpoint of Einsteinian mechanics, and the possibility of evolution in science through a period of time. But what I find central in your discussion is that science is all about understanding the mysteries of the world and keeping ourselves curious about those mysteries, and whether we can actually prepare ourselves to actually understand these mysteries and can solve these, whether these are kind of problems, or we can actually anticipate some kind of solutions also. Every turn in physics, or every turn in the physical chemical sciences, have led mankind to new discoveries and new social crises. Obviously, probably because of this COVID virus, we can now stare at a crisis and also simultaneously and paradoxically stare at the possibility of actually overcoming this crisis. But this is also a moment when we must understand that curiosity is good. Probably, if we can understand curiosity as a means, or as a means of getting into a social cohesion. I thank you, Professor Sharma, for your nice talk. But I find it very interesting also when you're talking like a author who is sounding very curious about so many different perspectives. Now we have a series of questions. Some questions for Professor Giridhar Rao from participants who have joined us through the webinar. Tridib, can we actually share these questions with Professor Rao and Professor Sharma if possible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we'll try to finish within a very short period of time because already we are running out of time. So there are many questions actually. So actually I'm picking some selected one. This is for Dr. Giridhar Rao, sir. And this question is from Mantu Patir. Why are pseudo-scientific conspiracy theories still being created in the current age of pervasive scientific knowledge?
Professor Sharma provided an answer to this question when he spoke about the two cultures division. Uh, one thing to keep in mind in the Indian context, for example, is that our school education quality is generally quite poor. Students are not taught to think, to evaluate evidence. They are taught so that they can pass an exam. They are taught so that they can memorize certain number of facts and reproduce them in the exam. They are not taught to evaluate evidence. And so it is very easy for a WhatsApp clip to circulate, to go viral with one claim or the other, with no way of judging, no way of evaluating. So from what Professor Sharma was saying, unless science education in the country improves, unless the constitutional mandate to develop a scientific temper is actually realized in our schooling system, these kinds of conspiracy theories will flourish because they serve a certain purpose of increasing anxiety. They serve a certain purpose of saying that the cause of my problem is that person or that group. They serve a certain political purpose. And unless we have an enlightened public, enlightened citizens, I am afraid this will continue. So the solution to that is to address the science education quality in our schooling system. I'm sure Professor Sharma also has an answer or some thoughts to offer on this.
Okay, sir, we have another question from Tanu Sharma. She is asking that can you suggest some theories on science fiction, especially regarding gender dystopia?
Hmm. Um, Let me write down a couple of names in the chat box rather than say them, right? So I'll do that. Meanwhile, please, next question.
Sir, as soon as you write your those theories in the chat box, I will pass it to the YouTube live because this question have come from the YouTube live.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. Meanwhile, do you have another question or?
Yes, sir. We have the last question for you.
Mhm.
Actually, there are last two questions for you. That is, many critics ignore science fiction and think that it's not pure literature. They behave it as child literature because literature reflects practical life, but science fiction reflect future and imagine life. Is it acceptable? This question is from Satyendra Bordoloi.
I began by saying, look at the kind of public images of science fiction that people have, right? Very, very dramatic, melodramatic pictures. And then I tried to show that in those melodramatic stories, there are issues being raised, themes being addressed, which are themes of identity, themes of belongings and self and other, themes of global scale dangers that humanity must confront and so on. So it is at the same time a kind of literature that is melodramatic, full of adventure and spaceships and whatnot, but at the same time, the good specimens in science fiction ask these civilizational questions about who we are, what does it mean to be human. So while this will continue to be the case because there is a mainstream. By the way, I should add that 50 years ago, science fiction was even more an outsider than it is today. 100 years ago, it was not even considered any kind of literature. It was considered only, as the questioner rightly said, children's literature or adolescents' literature, juvenile literature, sub-literature. But in the last 50 years, apart from a few outstanding examples such as Brave New World, which Principal Sir mentioned, several others in the mainstream science fiction have shown that how you can write a story of which is dramatic and yet ask serious questions. So I think the gap is narrowing, just as Professor Sharma was saying about the gulf between the humanities walas and the science walas is narrowing because intellectual discussion now consists of talking not just about Shakespeare but also Einstein. Similarly, in literature, literature consists not only of Virginia Woolf and E.M. Foster, but also Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Frank Herbert. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the last question for you is from Suman Bala. She is asking, do you think that science fiction has its roots in Indian mythology?
As Professor Sharma was saying in his talk, the fact that there is a Vimana mentioned in this epic or that Astra mentioned in that epic does not make them science fiction. Those weapons and those devices of traveling are available in fantasy fiction and epic fiction in many cultures. That does not make it science fiction. What makes a science fiction novel is a discourse out of which it is born. So I think it is an essentially, crucially a modern form of literature. So in that sense, it does not have roots in the epics, although there are similar devices used in epics.
Thank you, sir. So we have a question for Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma, sir.
Yes, I am here.
The question is from Rumi Das.
Mm.
What is the first science fiction novel in Assamese?
মই সেইটো কৈছিলো কি কৈছিলো অসমীয়া সায়েন্স ফিকশনৰ প্ৰথম নভেল গল্প হিচাপে বীৰচতীয়াৰ দেশ হৰিপ্ৰসাদ দাসে লিখা 37ত মিনি লজ সৌৰভ চলিহা 1950 মিনি লজ
হয় sir, হয়।
আৰু তেখেতৰ আৰু এখন কিতাপ আছে শব্দ প্ৰদূষণ সেই দুখনেই
Sir, আৰু এটা question আছিলে আপোনাৰ কাৰণে। How humanities is dealt with by the science fiction? হিমাক্ষী কাশ্যপে সুধিছে।
ধুনীয়া প্ৰশ্ন মই কিতাপ এখনৰ নাম কৈছিলো ৰেফাৰ কৰিছিলো কাকুৰ কিতাপখন কি বুলি কৈছিলো ফিউচাৰ অফ মাইণ্ড সেইখন চাবলৈ অনুৰোধ কৰিলো প্ৰশ্নটো আকৌ ৰিপিট কি আছিলে প্ৰশ্নটো
Sir, how humanities is dealt with by the science fiction?
Exactly. অন্যান্য ফিকশনৰ দৰে সায়েন্স ফিকশনেও তো ক্যাৰেক্টাৰ থাকে চৰিত্ৰ থাকে তাত মানৱতাৰ কথা থাকে কেৱল ভৱিষ্যত সমাজখন কেনেকুৱা হ'ব ভৱিষ্যত যন্ত্ৰপাতি কেনেকুৱা হ'ব আৰু মানুহৰ মনটো কেনেকুৱা হ'ব সেই কথাবোৰ তাত আলোচনা কৰা হৈছে বৰ ধুনীয়া প্ৰশ্নটো মোৰ মনত পৰি গ'ল এনজয় কৰিব কৈ দিও
হয় sir।
ষ্টৰীটো কোনে লিখিছিলে পাহৰিছো ৰবট এটা ঘৰলৈ নতুনকৈ আনিলে পঢ়া শুনা কৰিবলৈ সহায় কৰে চাহটা আনি দিয়ে ওলাই গ'লে তাক ইনষ্ট্ৰাকচন দিলে কাম কৰে সৰু ল'ৰা 10-12 বছৰীয়া কি কিবা এটা কাম কৰি আছে লগৰ ল'ৰা এটা আহিবলগীয়া আছে কিবা কাৰণে কি অহাটো নিবিচাৰে ৰবটটোক অৰ্ডাৰ দিছে সি যদি আহে দুৱাৰ মুখতে তই মই নাই বুলি কবি ৰবটটো পাজলত পৰিছে ই মোক কি ইনষ্ট্ৰাকচন দিলে ইটো আছে মই নাই বুলি কেনেকৈ কম তাৰ মনত সংঘাত হৈছে এই মানুহৰ মানসিক সংঘাতবিলাক এদিন এখন যন্ত্ৰই মানুহক স্থান ল'ব যেটোক আৰ্টিফিচিয়েল ইন্টেলিজেন্স বুলি কৈছে আৰ্টিফিচিয়েল ইন্টেলিজেন্স মানে ইন্টেলিজেন্স অফ এ robot, intelligence of computer, intelligence of the machines is called যদি হয় তেতিয়া হলে আমি সায়েন্স ফিকশন বিলাকত দেখো যে দুটা ৰবটৰ মাজত প্ৰেম হৈ গৈছে ৰবটে বাস্তৱ নায়িকা জিনৰ লগত প্ৰেম হৈ গৈছে এইবিলাক কমন কাহিনী গতিকে মানুহৰ মনটো আৰ্টিফিচিয়েল ইন্টেলিজেন্স আহাৰ পিছত সলনি হ'ব নেকি এইবিলাক ওপেন কুৱেশ্যন এনেকুৱাই হৈ দিব বুলি ক'ব নোৱাৰি কিন্তু মোৰ ধাৰণা মানুহৰ জগত সম্পৰ্কে ব্যাখ্যাৰ সলনি হ'ব কিন্তু ভাল পোৱা প্ৰতিশোধ পৰায়ণতা হিংসা দেহ এইবিলাক কিজানি একেই থাকিব মই কিজানি শব্দটো ব্যৱহাৰ কৰিছো এটো কোনে ৰুমি দাসে কৈছিল নে কোনে কৈছে
হয় হয় স্যার ৰুমি দাসে সুধিছিলে এটো কোৱেশ্চন স্যার
ভাল লাগিছে বহুত ধন্যবাদ
স্যার আপোনালৈ আৰু লাষ্ট কোৱেশ্চন এটা আছিলে
হয়
this question is from Anupam Kumar Hajarika. He have written as if we read SF by Ursula Le Guin, Samuel Delany, we notice that these writers have questioned the established domains of race, sex, gender, and sexuality. They envision better future through their writings. Won't it be wrong to claim that science fiction only predicts scientific inventions and what will happen to us and the planet?
No, what is the question then?
So last part is, won't it wrong to claim that science fiction only predicts scientific invention? What will happen to us and the planet?
Not exactly. If the science changes, our behavior, our activity, even our social activity will be changed. So our mind will be shaped. মই ইতিমধ্যে কোৱাৰ ধৰণে প্ৰেম ভাল পোৱা হিংসা এইবিলাক হয়তো একে থাকিব কিন্তু আমি সমাজত যেনেকে বিহেভ কৰো সেইবিলাক সলনি হ'ব সেইটো ডেফিনেটলি আৰু সায়েন্স ফিকশনত সেইটো ডিল কৰিবই লাগিব এতিয়া জন্তুৰ মাজত পৰিয়ালৰ কনসেপ্টটো নাই মানুহৰ মাজত আছে এদিন পৰিয়ালৰ কনসেপ্টটো নাথাকিব অতি সোনকালে পশ্চিমত নোহোৱা হৈ গৈছে লিভিং টুগেদাৰ হৈছে যদি আৰ্টিফিশিয়াল ইন্টেলিজেন্স হয় বাকি সকলো বিলাক হয় আমাৰ এই হিউম্যান সোশ্যাল ভ্যালুজ বিলাকো সলনি হ'ব হয়তো স্বাভাৱিক গতিকে যিকিজন ৰাইটাৰৰ কথা ৰেফাৰ কৰিছে তেওঁলোকে যদি ভৱিষ্যতৰ যন্ত্ৰবিলাক সলনি হ'ব বুলি কোৱাৰ লগে লগে ভৱিষ্যতৰ সোসাইটিয়াল বিহেভিয়াৰ বিলাক সলনি হ'বই সেইটো শুদ্ধ হৈছে হ'বনে এটোকে শুনি মোক পিছিলে না Am I right? কোনে এটো খুদিছিলে প্ৰশ্নটো কোন হাজৰিকা
অনুপম হাজৰিকা হয় স্যার তেও হয়তো শুনিছে তেও আছে আমাৰ লগত স্যার থ্যাংক ইউ very much sir now to the all panelists I would like to inform that I am opening few phone calls actually they cannot come live but they cannot on your video but they can speak here so there is a paper presenter from the first session who is sitting here for a very long time I am opening her line. If she want to ask something to the panelists, she can ask. Her name is Rabia Khanam. She is from Mewar University, Rajasthan. She is a research scholar. Rabia Khanam, madam, I am opening your call line. You can ask. Madam, please unmute yourself. I am sending a request. You can ask if you have any question. She is the paper presenter for the first session. That is today, 3 p.m. Okay, I think, okay. Hello, madam. Rabia Khanam, madam, are you listening me? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, madam,
Yes,
you can
am
just ask any question. Yes.
Yes. I just want to know that there is there any development in science fiction in English literature or something in in textual world. Hello.
Hello, yes. I think the panelists have heard the question and anyone of the expert can answer this question.
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I didn't understand the part where you said, is there any textual science fiction? What did you mean?
Ji, hello. Like Frankenstein, Mary Shelley,
Yes.
like Frankenstein. I'm also presenting paper on that. And there
Okay.
are much more, like in we see in the media, movies. We can see science fiction like Ape of the Planet and many others. I just want to know: is there any further development we can see in science fiction in English literature or in other, imaginative world? We can see.
Yes, of course. There is a very great deal development of the idea of Frankenstein has happened in science fiction. Even if you read Isaac Asimov's robot stories, that itself is quite a large difference from Frankenstein. So perhaps you could start there and you will find other robot android stories. I strongly recommend a movie called Blade Runner from 1982. So Blade Runner is a movie that you might like if you're working on science on Frankenstein. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we have with us another attendee. Her name is Sabitri Saikia. She is the HOD Assamese Department, Domdoma College. So I'll opening Sabitri Saikia madam's line. Madam, apuni kiba jodi question ase apuni khudibo pare. Moi apunar line to khuli aso. Apuni nijoke unmute kori lobo. Moi apunar request pathaisu madam. Apuni unmute kori lok nijok. Apuni apunar question to rakhibo pare. Savitri Saikia, madam, if you are listening, please unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hello.
Hi, ma'am. শুনিছো
Hello.
আপুনি সুধিব পাৰে question.
মই তপন কুমাৰ শৰ্মাক প্ৰশ্ন এটা কৰিব খুজিছো আছে নেকি তেখেত
আছে ma'am, আপুনি সুধক।
মই আছো সাবিত্ৰী কোৱা
হয় তপন দা নমস্কাৰ মই গোটেই প্ৰগ্ৰামটো চালো গিৰিধৰ ৰাও ছাৰৰ শুনিলো ছাৰ নমস্কাৰ ৰাও ছাৰ নমস্কাৰ শৰ্মা দা মই প্ৰশ্নটো সুধিব বিচাৰিছোঁ যে আপুনি আপোনালোক দুয়োগৰাকীৰে পৰা আমি গম পালোঁ যে মানে ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যন আৰু চাইণ্টিফিক লিটাৰেচাৰ এনেকৈ তিনিটা ভাগ কৰিছে ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যনটোৰ লগত আমাৰ ক্ৰাইচিছৰ যিটো আমাৰ যিটো টপিক যিটো আছে ক্ৰাইচিছ সেই সম্পৰ্কে আপুনি শেষৰ বক্তব্যখিনি সুন্দৰকৈ দাঙি ধৰিছে যে মানে এতিয়া গ্ল'বেল ৱাৰ্মিংটোৱেই মেইনলি আমাৰ কাৰণে এটা ক্ৰাইচিছৰ মানে এটা ডাঙৰ কাৰণ কৰোণা এবছৰ হয়তো থাকিব তাৰপিছত যাব এইখিনি শুনি যথেষ্ট আশ্বস্ত হ'লোঁ কিন্তু যিবিলাক মানে আমি পঢ়ি আছোঁ অসমীয়াত আমাৰ ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যন যথেষ্ট হৈছে নোহোৱা নহয় চিলেবাছত এইবাৰ দিছে ডিব্ৰুগড় বা অন্য লখিমপুৰৰ অট'নমাছ কলেজবিলাকতো আছে এইটো ছাবজেক্ট কিন্তু এইটোৱে আচলতে প্ৰমাণ কৰে যে আমাৰ চাইণ্টিফিক যিটো ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যনটোৱে চাইণ্টিফিক বা বিজ্ঞান মনস্কতাৰ কথাৰ লগতো জড়িত থাকে কিন্তু কথাটো হ'ল যে এইটো এতিয়া নতুন শিক্ষানীতিত আমাৰ আৰ্টছ বা ছায়েন্স বা কমাৰ্চ গোটেইবোৰ মিক্সাৰ হৈ গৈছে মই যিমান দূৰ জানো মই বৰ বেছি নাজানো বা বেছি অধ্যয়ন কৰা নাই গতিকে এই ক্ষেত্ৰত এইটো এটা আমাৰ এটা জাগৰণৰ সৃষ্টি কৰা ভাল নেকি ধৰক লেখা মেলা ইতিমধ্যে ইংৰাজী সাহিত্যত বা ইংলিছত মুভি বা তেনেকৈ হৈছে কিতাপো হৈছে এজুৱেলছৰ পৰা আমি পঢ়ি আহিছোঁ কিন্তু অসমীয়াত এইটো 40ৰ দশকত আবাহনত হৰিপ্ৰসাদ বৰুৱাৰ কথা কৈছে আবাহনত এইটো প্ৰথম লেখা হৈছিলে তাৰপিছত ধৰক আমাৰ আলোচনীবিলাকত এতিয়া যথেষ্ট হৈছে কিন্তু চিলেবাছত দিলেই সমস্যাটোৰ সমাধান হ'ব বুলি ভাবে নেকি এইটো আৰু কেনেকৈ ধৰক আগুৱাই নিব পাৰি তাক এই বিষয়ে আপোনাৰ পৰা দুআষাৰমান জানিব বিচাৰিছোঁ ছাৰ
মোতকে আপোনালোকৰ দৰে টিচিং লাইনত থকা মানুহে বেছি জানিব মই সৰু ভাৱ শ্বেয়াৰ কৰিব পাৰোঁ প্ৰথম কথা যিবিলাক বৌদ্ধিক আলোচনী বুলি ভবা যায় প্ৰান্তিক গৰিয়সী সাতসৰী প্ৰকাশ অন্ততঃ সেইবিলাকত বাকী বৌদ্ধিক বুলি নভবা বাকীবিলাকতো দৈনিক বাতৰিকাকতত এই ধৰণৰ প্ৰবন্ধ পাতিৰ সংখ্যাটো বঢ়াটো যুগুত তাৰ কাৰণে সচেতনভাৱে কিবা কৰিব পাৰি নেকি ভাবিব পাৰি আৰু এটা কথা পিয়ৰলি ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যনৰ ওপৰত নিৰ্ভৰ কৰি অসমীয়াত আলোচনী নাই ইংৰাজী ভাষাত কমেও 500খন আলোচনী আছে ফুল্লি ডিভটেড টু ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যন ইতিমধ্যে 2-4টা কথা আহিছে ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যনৰ লগতে ফিউচাৰ ছায়েন্সৰ লগত ফিউচাৰ মাইণ্ডটো সলনি হ'ব নাই ফিউচাৰ সামাজিক আদব কায়দা আচৰণ এইবিলাক সলনি হ'ব নাই যিকেইটা প্ৰশ্ন আহিছে বৰ সুন্দৰ প্ৰশ্ন এই আটাইবিলাক প্ৰশ্ন সেই আলোচনীবিলাকত প্ৰবন্ধ পাতিত ঠাই পাব লাগে আৰু ঠাই পাবই কিন্তু তাৰ কাৰণে আগতে আমাৰ আলোচনীবিলাকত সপ্তাহৰ মূৰত বা মাহেকৰ মূৰত বা পষেকৰ মূৰত এটা পেজ থাকে বিজ্ঞানৰ কাৰণে এইটো বিজ্ঞানৰ পৃষ্ঠা তেনেকুৱা পৃষ্ঠা এতিয়া ছায়েন্স ফিকশ্যনৰ পৃষ্ঠা বুলি আজিলৈকে ওলোৱা নাই আমি সেইটো কথা এক্টিভলি ভাবিব পাৰোঁ আৰু পৰামৰ্শ দিব পাৰোঁ কাক পৰামৰ্শ দিম সেইটোতকেও আমিও সেইবিলাক বৌদ্ধিক পৰিমণ্ডলৰ লগত জড়িত আমি নিজেও আগভাগ লৈ সেইটো আৰম্ভ কৰিব পাৰোঁ এতিয়া তাত ফিউচাৰ ছ'চাইটি কি হ'ব পৃথিৱী ধ্বংস হৈ যাব নেকি যদি নহয় পৰিৱৰ্তিত সমাজখন কেনেকুৱা হ'ব ছায়েন্স বিজ্ঞান প্ৰযুক্তিবিদ্যাই কি ভূমিকা ল'ব এই সকলোবিলাক সামৰি চেগা চৌকা আলোচনাকেও পদ্ধতিগত আলোচনা আৰু কিতাপ পত্ৰ বহা উচিত বাঢ়িব লাগে আৰু আমাৰ মাজৰ পৰাই ল'ব লাগিব আন বহুতক উপদেশ দিয়াতকে আমি প্ৰত্যেকেই কিবা নহয় কিবা বৌদ্ধিক পৰিমণ্ডলৰ লগত জড়িত
মানে কিতাপতকেও চিনেমা টিনেমা দেখুৱাই কলেজ বিলাকত বা তেনেকে বিজ্ঞান ক্লাছ এটা স্কুল টাইপ খুলি মানে কৰিব পাৰি নেকি তেনেকে
নিশ্চয় নিশ্চয় নহয় IQCSLও বোলে বছৰেকত 2টা আলোচনা কেৱল এইটো দিশতে হ'ব তেনেকে ভাবিব পাৰে আজিকালি সায়েন্স ক্লাব তাৰপিছত ইকো ক্লাব এনেকুৱা বিলাক গাঁৱে গাঁৱে গঠন হৈছে এইবিলাক সায়েন্স টেকনলজি ডিপাৰ্টমেণ্ট অসম বিজ্ঞান সমিতি এইবিলাক অনুষ্ঠানে আগভাগ লৈছে সেই ইকো ক্লাব বিলাকত এটা ধাৰণা যে বিজ্ঞানৰ মানুহখিনিহে বিজ্ঞানৰ ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীয়ে জড়িত থাকিব তাত সকলো সেকশনৰ মানুহ যাতে জড়িত পৰে সেই ব্যৱস্থাবোৰ হ'ব লাগে
হয়
আমাৰ
স্যার
প্ৰশ্নটো যেতিয়া মনলৈ আহিছে এনেকুৱা হোৱা উচিত এদিন হ'ব মই সেইটোকে আশা কৰিছো
হয় থ্যাংক ইউ
সোনকালে
স্যার
এতিয়াৰ পৰাই হ'ব
হয় থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার থ্যাংক ইউ Savitri Sekia Vaidya. So last phone call I will just open. She is also a paper presenter. Her name is I think Neha. Neha Jain. She is from National Institute of Technology, Silchar. She is a paper presenter of our 3rd session. Neha Jain, madam, I am opening your line. Please kindly ask your question if you have any. Please unmute yourself. I am sending a request to you. Neha Jain, madam, if you have any question, you can ask, or I am disconnecting you. Okay. Thank you, all the respected panelists. So there are already we have come to an end. Now we have 2 important announcements regarding some technical queries. The first is about the feedback form. The feedback form has already been circulated in the Zoom webinar chat box, and it has also been posted in the YouTube live video comment box, and we will also provide it in the WhatsApp group of the participants as well as our Telegram channel, live Telegram broadcast channel. So everyone have to submit the feedback form within 30 minutes. And most important point is that for the paper presenter, we will issue you another feedback link. So this feedback link is only for the participants of the national webinar, not for the paper presenters. Next, at 3 p.m. we'll start the first session of our paper presentation. Invitations were already sent. Again, we will send now at your valid email IDs. So all the paper presenters, I request you to join 10 minutes before the scheduled time. Thank you, everyone. Now I'd like to request convener sir to proceed.
Thank you, Tridip. Before I offer actually the vote of thanks and ask our principal to conclude, there was a question I saw coming from one of the participants. She is probably outside Assam and could not understand what Professor Tapan Sharma, because he was sometimes speaking in Assamese, was actually saying. But just in brief, that he was saying that artificial intelligence might change the world one day. So we had this idea that economics can change the world. Now we have the idea that technology, of course, can change the world, can alter the way we think and alter the way we behave, but the basic human emotions might remain the same. That is why in science fiction stories we hear robots falling in love with each other. So the basic human emotions might be same, but the larger society might change, and this change can come because of science and because of the applications of science. So this is a kind of different trajectory that he has highlighted. The idea that was given by Marx and all the philosophers, that economics and the production of goods actually produces the kind of thinking. But if this is if this is different that Professor Sharma has said, technocracy of course is a medium of or a mode of production, but pure scientific thought as different from technocracy might also change the way we behave and we live ourselves. Sabitri Shoikia also asked a different question. She asked about the new education policy and the implications of understanding, in the present context of the crisis. Particularly, she asked if science fiction syllabus containing science fiction works could actually help in pursuing what she suggests is the new education policy. And therefore, Professor Sharma has again said that because we are also related somehow to an academic and intellectual atmosphere, it is best for us that we develop and dedicate ourselves to writing science fiction or discuss science fiction works which are important for us. He said that there are many journals in English which discuss science fiction works, but hardly anything in Assamese or very less in Assamese or in other regional languages which deal about the science fiction works. So these are the basic issues that they raised and the question. So I think that should answer the participants' query about science fiction and its relevance. I thank all the panelists, Professor Giridhar Rao, who has joined us and took such a long time to be with us despite his busy schedule. I thank Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma for proposing the idea that we can actually go to a new idea of understanding society through understanding science. I thank Professor Dr. Suranjan Sharma sir, our principal, who has been an constant source of inspiration and who has patronized the whole thing. I thank Trilip Bharali, who has been a technical hand doing all this kind of technical jargons and jugglery with so many other things. I thank the co-conveners and the conveners of this webinar, my colleagues from the departments, Rajiv Mohanto, Professor Rajiv Mohanto, and Mrs. Babita Kolita. I also thank all the paper presenters who will be with us and who probably has listened to us and have contributed largely to enriching the experience. May I now request our principal, Dr. Suranjan Sharma sir, to put forward his brief points, sir.
Hello, Mr. Bharali.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sengupta. We have heard Professor Giridhar Rao and Dr. Tapan Kumar Sharma, and actually we came to know from their illuminating lectures some points. Firstly, science fiction is included in the educational course of the universities of India. Secondly, science fiction promises new technology, limitless source of energy. A new world is promised with fantastic inventions. Thirdly, science fiction helps in critical thinking. Fourthly, science fiction literature helps in democratic brotherhood. And fifthly, nowadays people in intellectual thoughts discuss not only Shakespeare's but also scientific inventions like Big Bang theory, etc., etc. Sixth, there are enough literature in the local languages. For example, in Assamese language, there are lots of literatures in science fictions. Seventh, scientific theory is acceptable if it has a predictive power. So prediction is heart of science fiction. And lastly, the board scholars came with a positive thinking that human civilization will last forever. It will never die. So I think these are the good points from their illuminating lectures we have heard. So thanking you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, convener, sir. Thank you, principal, sir. Thank you, Dr. Giridhar Rao, sir. And thank you, Professor Tapan Kumar Sharma, sir. for giving your valuable time. So now everything we have finished and we are going to end this session. So thank you all the attendees. So now we have 68 attendees till now, and earlier it was 100 above, and in YouTube we crossed the I think 400 mark. So I think we have been able to send our message to a large audience. Thank you, everyone. I am ending the meeting from here. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.